Formula One drivers are supposed to fear their rivals, not the weather. But throughout the sport's history, rain, fog, standing water, and even darkness have created moments so dangerous that some drivers wondered if they would make it home. A race abandoned after just 2 laps. A world champion nearly swallowed by a wall of spray. A crash so terrifying it changed Formula One forever. And a driver who risked everything in conditions so bad he could barely see the nose of his own car. These are the most dangerous weather conditions in Formula One history. And what happened at Spa in the end might be the most controversial race ever run. But first, we need to go back to a day when Formula One learned just how deadly rain could be. It's 1976, the Nürburgring. A circuit so dangerous drivers nicknamed it the Green Hell. Over 14 miles long, surrounded by forests, barriers, and virtually no runoff areas. If something went wrong, help could be minutes away. And on race day, the weather couldn't make up its mind. Parts of the circuit were dry, other sections were soaked. The problem was that nobody could see the entire track at once. Drivers would enter one corner in sunshine and arrive at the next in heavy rain. Most of the grid wanted the race postponed. One driver even led a meeting trying to convince everyone not to race. His name was Niki Lauda, the reigning world champion. But the race started anyway, and on just the second lap, disaster struck. Lauda lost control. His Ferrari slammed into the barriers and burst into flames. The inferno trapped him inside. Other drivers stopped and dragged him from the wreckage, but the damage had already been done. He suffered severe burns and inhaled toxic fumes. At one point, doctors believed he wouldn't survive. The crash wasn't caused entirely by the weather, but the unpredictable conditions were a major factor. And from that day forward, Formula One could never ignore the dangers of bad weather again. What's incredible is that just 6 weeks later, Lauda was back in the car. But another driver would soon face conditions that were arguably even worse. And this time, the entire world was watching. Japan, 1988. Suzuka. A typhoon had battered the circuit before race day. Rain was falling relentlessly. The track looked more like a river than a racetrack, yet the race went ahead. And right from the start, visibility was almost non-existent. Drivers weren't just racing each other, they were guessing where the circuit went. The spray thrown up by the cars created giant walls of water. At over 180 miles per hour, drivers could barely see a few meters ahead. Imagine driving down a motorway blindfolded. Now, imagine doing it in a Formula One car. Somehow, Ayrton Senna thrived. While everyone else fought to survive, he danced through the rain. The Brazilian recovered from a terrible start and charged through the field. By the finish, he had secured his first world championship. But the images from that day were unforgettable. Cars disappearing completely into clouds of spray, drivers wrestling for control, and a reminder that the line between bravery and danger in Formula One was incredibly thin. Still, nothing compared to what happened in Belgium 10 years later. Because this wasn't a fight against the rain, it was a fight against complete chaos. Spa-Francorchamps. 1998. One of the wettest races Formula One has ever seen. The rain was relentless. Standing water covered the circuit. Drivers could barely see the rear lights of the car ahead. Then came the start. The lights went out, and within seconds, everything exploded. David Coulthard lost control. Cars scattered everywhere. Drivers slammed into each other with nowhere to go. One crash became 2, then 3, then 13. The biggest pileup Formula One had ever seen. Carbon fiber covered the track. Cars sat destroyed in every direction. Miraculously, nobody was seriously injured, but the race had only just begun. After the restart, the conditions remained horrendous. At one point, Michael Schumacher was leading comfortably. Victory looked guaranteed. Then he caught David Coulthard. The spray was so thick, Schumacher couldn't see him. Not the corner, not the braking zone, not even the car itself. The Ferrari ploughed straight into the back of the McLaren. Schumacher stormed into Coulthard's garage afterwards, furious, convinced he'd been deliberately taken out. That's how dangerous the conditions were. Even the greatest driver of his generation couldn't tell what was in front of him. And yet somehow Formula One still hadn't learned its lesson. Because 6 years later, the sport produced one of the most frightening qualifying sessions ever witnessed. Shanghai, 2007. Dense fog surrounded the circuit. Rain hammered the track. Visibility was dreadful. Drivers were struggling to identify braking markers. Corners appeared out of nowhere. The helicopters couldn't fly. And that's a problem, because if medical helicopters can't take off, seriously injured drivers can't be transported quickly. Several delays followed as officials desperately searched for a solution. It highlighted something Formula One had largely ignored. Sometimes the danger isn't on the track, it's above it. If emergency services can't operate properly, racing becomes almost impossible. But if Shanghai was worrying, Suzuka in 2014 became tragic. Heavy rain had been forecast all weekend. In fact, a typhoon was approaching Japan. Many questioned whether the race should even begin. Eventually, it started behind the safety car. The conditions were dreadful. Water pooled across the circuit. Spray reduced visibility. Drivers fought simply to stay on the track. Then Adrian Sutil crashed. A recovery vehicle was sent onto the circuit. Moments later, Jules Bianchi lost control in the same area. His Marussia slid off the road and struck the recovery vehicle. The impact was devastating. Bianchi suffered severe head injuries. 9 months later, he passed away. Formula One lost one of its brightest young talents. The tragedy shocked the entire sport, and the consequences were enormous. New safety procedures were introduced. The virtual safety car was created. Recovery vehicle protocols changed. The sport realized that weather could turn a routine incident into a catastrophe. For years afterwards, drivers became far more vocal whenever conditions felt unsafe. Which brings us to perhaps the most controversial race on this list. Spa-Francorchamps, 2021. The weather forecast looked terrible. Then it got worse. Rain poured down all day. Fans waited for hours. Drivers sat in garages watching radar screens. Officials searched desperately for a window. It never came. The spray was simply too dangerous. Even behind the safety car, drivers could barely see. Max Verstappen later described visibility as almost zero. Yet Formula One still faced a problem. If no race took place, there would be no official result. So eventually the field completed just enough laps behind the safety car to classify the event. No racing, no overtakes, no competition. Just cars circulating through endless spray. Then the race was called off. Half points were awarded. Fans who had stood in the rain all day were furious. Some called it a disgrace. Others argued officials had no choice. But the event proved something important. Modern Formula One cars create so much spray that visibility has become one of the sport's biggest challenges. The cars are safer than ever. The circuits are safer than ever. Yet heavy rain remains one of Formula One's greatest enemies, because no matter how advanced the technology becomes, drivers still need to see where they're going. And that's what makes weather so terrifying. You can prepare for a rival. You can prepare for strategy mistakes. You can even prepare for mechanical failures, but you can't control the rain. You can't stop the fog, and you certainly can't argue with a typhoon. For decades, Formula One has pushed the limits of speed. But every once in a while, nature reminds everyone who's really in charge. And sometimes even the fastest drivers in the world are completely powerless. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more motorsport stories just like this. It really helps the channel grow and lets me know what you want to see next. And as always, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.